Oh no. Good afternoon. Welcome to our questions online. I'm so excited to have so many people with us this afternoon. And yeah, it'd be great. You get to meet them and get to hear loads and loads of stories, which is fantastic. My name is Lizzie. I work for Fresh Expressions in the kind of communication side, and I live in Liverpool. I'm a lay pioneer, and with my husband, I run Story House, that is a coffee shop and a Fresh Expression of church. And for those of you, maybe you know stuff, you know what Fresh Expressions is about. Maybe you don't. Maybe this is your first time connecting in some way. Fresh Expressions is a growing movement of ordinary people across all denominations who are passionate about connecting with those who don't know Jesus and forming new communities of faith with the people they meet in the places where they meet them. And these could look different, so different across the country, from new housing, rural, urban, suburban, messy church, third age, forests, coffee shops, beaches, pubs, barns, online, and even sometimes in a church building. And what's great is we've got some people here today who have got some great examples of very different contextual Fresh Expressions of church. So if you do say hello, if you're joining us from around the country or internationally, we often get some people tuning in from like the States and stuff like that. So do say hi, tell us where you are. And also, if you've got questions and comments throughout this broadcast, do put them online, and we'll try to get to some of those later on, because we love to have a conversation with everyone who's in the room, even if you're sat watching us on your device. So I'm going to introduce my guests. I'm going to get them to introduce themselves, actually, because that's a lot better. So we're going to start with Jonny. Tell us where you are and what you're doing.
Hi, thanks, Lizzie. I'm Jonny Baker, and I live in London. I'm in the roof of my house. And in terms of who I am and what I'm about, I'm basically passionate about pioneering. I mean, I describe myself as an advocate for pioneers. So I love inspiring, encouraging, being with pioneers and seeing what they're up to. But I also sort of feel like I have a role advocating for them back to the institution and whatever else. And I work for the Church Mission Society, where, the last 11 years now, we've run training for pioneers, and through that have just built up a bit of a network community of wonderful people, many of whom are here today. So that's great.
Amazing. Oh no, it's great. And so we'll mention a bit more about the pioneer training later on, if for anyone who's interested, but it is a fantastic course, and like I'm sure these guys on screen would be able to kind of testify to that. So Anna, where are you and what are you doing?
Hi, I'm Anna Hembury. I live in Hull. I've been here my husband and I have been here for about 24 years. And we are CMS mission partners. Don't really have not big on official titles, but I guess it's kind of community development work.
Brilliant. Oh no,
so
that sounds
making mischief.
That sounds good. Amazing. Oh, it's so great to have you with us. And then if we'll go down to Anne Marie. Tell us where you are and what you're doing.
Hi Lizzie and everyone, I'm Anne Marie, and I run a charity that I set up called 28 Too Many. I live in London, North London, and the charity has about 10 people. It works across Africa. We've got one person in Australia and one person in Kenya, but the rest are sort of remotely around the UK and Europe. And I'm also a lay minister and a chaplain in a hospice as well.
Wow, that sounds amazing. Oh, it's great to have you with us. Thank you so much. I can't wait to hear more about what you got to share. And then David, where are you? What are you doing?
Yeah, well, hi, I'm David. I'm from the Romford area, which is in Chelmsford Diocese. I'm someone what you would call loyal to the soil. So I've kind of been born and bred in a place, kind of grown up here all my life, kind of been a part of the culture and the life of the place. And so I'm currently a third year curate in the Church of England. And I studied with CMS as part of that kind of link to Jonny. And I suppose that would be part of why I'm here. I've dabbled a few things, pioneering or somewhat contextual kind of mission, but I'm predominantly known for helping my community to merge a boxing club in its community, which came to life through weird and wonderful ways.
Oh, that sounds awesome. Amazing. I can't wait to hear more about that. And then C, we've got you. Do you introduce yourself?
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I'm on the edge of Leicester in a place called Lubbersthorpe, which is a new housing estate, which will eventually be a large village, small town. So I arrived before anybody moved here, and employed by Churches Together, so an ecumenical project, as a pioneer community worker. So primarily to build a healthy community for everyone, and to also see some form of church develop, or missional community. So yeah, I've been here for 4.5 years now.
Amazing. Oh no, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks to everyone else who's joining us already live. If you've got questions and comments throughout the conversation, do put them up. Thanks to those that already said hi. We've got people from all different parts of the country and Switzerland who have joined us as well, which is great. And so Jonny, today this conversation is about pioneer practices, and you've written, there's a book that's coming out about it as well, but just wondered if you could tell us a bit about where, how you came up with those ideas, and what, there's 4 themes, aren't there, of the practices. If you could just tell us a bit about that.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I found lockdown quite a good opportunity to gather some thoughts, because I was stuck at home and I'm a doer, so I can't just not do anything. So yeah, I produced this book called Pioneer Practice that should land on my doormat on Friday, so I'm excited about that. But in terms of what it is, the idea for it came from running pioneer training at CMS for 10 years. And I just felt over that decade, we just... I mean, don't tell anyone this, but when we started, we had no idea what we're doing. Now we've got a little bit more idea. So I think it's a sort of practical wisdom that we've learned. And I wanted to do something that was full colour, that didn't have academic references in it, was stories and practical stuff rather than more the theological, missiological. I mean, I love that stuff too, but we've done quite a lot of stuff in that space already. So... yeah, that was the idea. And I've kind of organised that into 4 themes. But before I jump into the 4 themes, one of the things I also did with that was a little bit of research around pioneering. And one of the things I researched was, what is pioneering? And when students train with us, we ask them that question before we've done any training, so it's just to kind of gut responses. So if you can share my screen, I'll just quickly show. I mean, there were obviously a lot of answers to that questions, but they basically I grouped them into 5 things, and I really like this. So you probably can't read the writing, it's a bit small, but it'll give you a feel for the book as well. But so the first one's finding a new way or path, so that pioneers like finding a new way to do stuff. Secondly, seeing and imagining different possibilities. I think pioneers are all about that, and what see is one of the themes we're going to explore. Starting and building stuff, don't just have ideas and see things, but actually make things happen. Fourthly, responding to injustice to make a better world. So I think Anne-Marie is a great example of that with her project that we'll hear about in a bit. That's the driver for her. And then lastly, I guess this is the fresh expressions one, growing new forms of church where church isn't. So I really like that, in terms of pioneering. And I think it's a bit of a mix and match thing. So you can kind of think, well, yeah, I am starting a new path and I'm responding to injustice. And actually out of that, I'm growing a community. So they're not discrete. And then practice, I mean, the book actually is pioneer practice rather than practices, though it does include practices. I began to think about practice. So as a helpful way of thinking about pioneering. So to give an example of a practice, one of the things I do in my spare time is I manage a bit of woodland, and there's a whole set of skills and tools and knowledge around how you might look after a piece of woodland. There's a kind of practice, a way that you do that, and I found that sort of practical practice way of looking at things quite a helpful idea to think about in relation to pioneering. So that's the big idea, but it's sort of short pieces you can dive into where you like. So what I'm going to do is go through those 4 themes and then chat with someone on each one. So you can stop the share now. Oh, it's gone anyway. So first up, the first theme is C. And I mean, for me, I said this from the word go, I think, when I thought about pioneering. It sounds a weird thing to say, but I think it's a gift of sight. You see possibilities, and often if most people are looking in this direction, I think pioneers see something over here or over here, left field or off the beaten track, or they're seeing something from the perspective of the community that other people aren't noticing. And one of the challenges about seeing is because you see it, it seems really, really obvious, and yet you find out nobody else is looking at it. So there's a lovely quote actually that we've done a sort of double page thing on in the book from somebody in the research. It says something like, "I'm not crazy, I just see things differently," which I really love. Make a good t-shirt. But Sue, I wonder if we could chat to you about seeing. I mean, I think your involvement in Lowestoft's a really interesting project for pioneering practice, because you got in on the ground floor in a new housing area before a single house was built. So, and now you're 5 years in since you were first employed, I think, probably 10 years in.
Nearly 5.
Yeah. So can you tell us about seeing right at the beginning before you were there? If you know, how did someone see the possibility of what you're doing?
So it came from really the ministers in the surrounding area that saw that there was going to be this new community which would have 12,000 people in it eventually. And I had seen another area of housing develop where no community was formed, and it became a bit of a place, a renter's paradise. So people rented and moved out, and the community centre came in really late, so the community didn't form. And a group of ministers got together and people interested in the surrounding area and said, here's where the church can really have an impact. And they wrote to the district council and said, if this goes ahead, can we partner with you to help build a healthy community? So they saw the possibility, and then partnership came about because Churches Together said they would employ a community worker, and the part of the 106 agreement where the community facilities come, there was a space for myself or the community work out of. So I'm in a posh porter cabin basically here, which is a gathering space where you can get about 30 people in, and that came really early, and just when the job came up, I was like, I'm not sure new housing's my thing, because I've always been in an established community, but because I saw that not only the parish council and churches together could see an opportunity for community to form, when I delved into the developers' kind of vision for this area, which was is family basically. They wanted to create a place where people could live and work and play. And so it felt like the founding story had some desire from all parties for it not to just be, that story of a soulless housing estate, but for, you know, it's to create a really healthy community. And that, I thought, I can sign up to that. But when you arrive and all you've got are 12 foundations for houses, that is quite a challenge to see what's going to come out of it. And you've got all these plans, and it's 20 years before it's going to be finished. You know, how do you see where God's at work? How do you make community form well? And I mean, for me, and undoubtedly our founding story is one of partnership, and the partnership that can create, listening to each other, working together really well between the people who look after the open space, the district council, and the developer has really seen something grow together that, you know, I feel God's been at work right from the beginning of that, because we've worked really well together. And yeah, that's about, I think that's something about being open to people. And early on, the developer said to me, and we laugh about it now, he said that when I went and met him in his offices in Loughborough, he said, right, yeah, I've worked together with churches before. I'm not sure about this. Didn't have a say in it. And really, basically, he was waiting to see if, you know, I would listen to the community, if we were truly for the community, or whether we had our own agenda. And actually, you know, he's seen that, yeah, we are about community for everyone, for all faiths and none. And he now openly supports us. And other projects that he's doing is to replicate model. So yeah, seeing the people, listening to the people, really important.
Yeah, thanks, Sue. That's great. Just one last thought on seeing before jumping into the next thing. I think one of the challenges, I suppose, and I wonder how this has played out for you, is that sometimes people move into a new area and basically they do what they did in church when they land in a new space. And to be blunt, it doesn't work because they haven't listened to the culture and done it in a way that connects with the culture. So I wonder, and you know, in terms of, this is one of the reasons I absolutely love being at CMS, because there's a whole history of doing good and bad across cultures, but there's that awareness of listening and doing things on the inside of the culture. How's that process of, you know, imagining and seeing what might emerge that really fits the soil, as David was saying? I like that, loyal to the soil. What does it mean to be loyal to the soil of Lubbersthorpe, as opposed to how people did things before they came in?
I think it's listening. Have I got a bit of an echo? I think I have. Anyway, yeah, I think it's about listening to people and seeing where they're at. So at first, I kind of tried to build a bit of a team from people in the surrounding area. That didn't really work. And I had in my head, and this was something I learned at CMS, is about growing Indigenous leaders. And so waiting for different people to tell me what they wanted, and then it was like they wanted to get together and they wanted to pray, and we just started off praying as a small group of Christians, and then started meeting and just talking about faith and understanding where they were coming from. So loads of people have moved locally, so they've had a Christian community only a mile or two away that they're still connected with, but they want to work to see something happen here. So there's that element, and then there's another element where we've done an outdoor church, so families based, because there's loads of families here, but it's connected with the rural feel of Lubbersthorpe. So it's kind of a bit forest church, mossy church, muddy church, almost, that sort of thing. And that's what the families like doing, being outside. And plus the porta cabin is quite small, so you have to make do with the not make do with the open space, but make the open space work for you. So it's not only the people, it's the context and what you've got around you physically as well.
Thanks, Sue. We'll move on, but I mean, for me, that's a massive area of practice. That paying attention, that noticing, that seeing, and I think nurturing imagination, and that cross-cultural thing. There's a whole set of things that sound really obvious, but I think are a real key to pioneer practice. The second area I wanted to talk about. Can you share my screen again? Was the area of build. I mean, one of the phrases I love is from a guy called Gerald Arbuckle, who says we don't just need dreamers, we need dreamers who do. And I think pioneering has that dreaming, but actually it's also about doing some stuff in relation to it, which involves work. And in the research I did, I found this really interesting. One of the questions I asked people was, what do you feel you need most help with in pioneering? And theology was right down the bottom of the list, but top of the list was admin, practical managerial skills, and then support, permission and understanding at the structural level. And another question was, what's your biggest challenge? And the top challenges are very practical things like building team, time, and money or resource. So it's quite interesting in terms of build, how that works. And then one of the things I've done in the book, you won't be able to see the detail of this, but hopefully this will give a feel for it, is I'm really interested in how long it takes for a project to build. So Anna shared she'd been in Hull for 24 years, which is amazing. But this is a timeline for a cafe that the timeline runs for about 6 years, and Sue talked about 10 years, whereas in the church often there's funding for maybe 3 years for something, if there's any funding at all. So I think that's part of the build. And then part of building something too always goes through difficulty and challenge, and through the desert, as it were. So Anne-Marie, thought I'd ask about this, and this is one of my favourite quotes in the book. I don't know if you can see this on the screen. When I talked to Anne-Marie, an interview, and I love this quote where Anne-Marie says, "I look harmless as a petite woman from London. That's a tactic because I'm a lot more harm than people think, yet by the time they realise it's too late." So Anne-Marie, we can stop sharing the screen now, Lizzie. Thanks. Yeah, I mean, Anne-Marie, I think you're totally amazing in terms of, I remember when you turned up at CMS and you said, you know, my goal is to eradicate female genital mutilation from Africa, 28 countries. I was like, wow, that is something to see. So there's like a seeing thing there, which we won't talk about, though is interesting. But how do you, having had that idea, build something that's going to contribute to that change in the world?
Well, I think actually it is useful to have these other skill sets behind you, and I think some of it is about planning. I got this idea when I was out in Africa, and then I thought, I came back to my church and said, you know, this is what I want to do, and my church kind of said, I don't think so. And I thought, well, I think I'll do it anyway. But I persuaded eventually CMS to take me on. And my church kind of said, right, we'll put you on a sort of probationary internship for 7 years until we think if it's safe enough for you to do it, really. But I suppose one of the things was actually starting at the beginning with a team. It was just me and 2 volunteers I persuaded, one from corporate life from my past, and one from a woman I met on a demonstration on International Women's Day with a placard, and she said, I said it got end FGM, and she said, I want to do that. So it's like, well, come on then, come and join me. So it was literally like that. And then we employed lots more volunteers, if you can employ volunteers. And it was then a couple of years before I got enough money to pay the 2 leaders, if you like, the research manager and the comms manager. And then there were just 3 of us. We divvied out the work. So that's kind of something about team, which I think is very important at the minute, at the beginning. And it took probably about 5 years, quite catalytic actually, to actually develop the team. And then I carelessly got cancer, which is always messy, and my team, most of which left. And then I regrouped and got a new team and an ops manager, and kind of worked out. I'd always said it was a 10-year vision, and that's what I've kept to, really, because I think it's enough to be a founder and director for 10 years. I think after that you need something different. So team is important to me. I think time is another issue. And in 2005, I set the 10-year vision and exit goal. So I always said I'll be here for 10 years. But actually, a couple of things of like Inspire magazine picked up on my story somehow and gave me an award. And I thought, gosh, I didn't even know anyone knew I was out there yet. And it's only 2011. But then I got a tier fund scholarship for 3 years from 2012 to 15. And that helped me just figure out what I was doing a little bit, having given up my day job. And also bumping into the CMS people. I did the leadership course and the entrepreneurship course, and then later chaplaincy modules, individual modules. But actually, what I met was a bunch of people very like me, slightly out of the box, or completely out of the box, really. And it gave me, I met my tribe, really, and I then didn't feel so weird around churchy people and my family and everybody else who thought I'd completely lost the plot, really. So I think it's different things for different eras, but 5 years to build and then another 5 years to sort of cement the foundations, really. And then, of course, regrouping through COVID when we lost 75% of our funding in the first 3 months. So I kind of sat on my static bike in my house for 28 minutes a day, and we've just raised about 17 grand for that. We got match funded. So it's having to be a little bit creative, really. I kind of thought these things cover team and time and tithe, which is really money. We started from zero, but I did get an opportunity to speak just for like 5 minutes at a New Wine Women's Day, and there were 900 women in the audience. I told them a little story about the girl I'd met in Africa, and I literally heard 900 women inhale their breath, and they offered us to send buckets around at the end, and we got 9 grand put in the buckets. Can you believe it? And even one lady put a bus fare in home. I thought, I felt sorry for this woman afterwards. But actually, that was the seed funding for us to be able to build the charity. And then later, we got a donor, some Christians praying in the Middle East undercover, in a company, corporate company, said, we'd like to send you some money. Is it okay if we do? So things come completely offside. And then finally got a donor who wrote to all the FGM charities. There's a few around the country all doing slightly different things. We decided to do research because nobody else was doing it. So for me, this FGM work was all about looking for the gap, and the gap would make the tipping point, really, for the whole sector. And it has done. That's exactly what it's done. But this key donor didn't get any replies from anybody else. And he was quite a feisty guy. He kind of said, send me your memorandum of articles and send me your business plan and send me your accounts and stuff. And I thought, oh, okay, well, I sent it all off. And he's backed me ever since. So I think sometimes it's like using the skills you've got and meeting people where they're at. And I think the final thing was planning, which to me is, to make my nice 4 things of tea, is a to-do list, really, or planning. And I think for that, it's developing yourself. So I did a Fresh Expressions course for a year to figure out what I could do in setting something up. I then helped teach it. I did the modules at CMS, which helped me leadership and entrepreneurship. I sat in a room for 2 days. I borrowed somebody's house while they went out to work and sat with flip charts and literally pasted the room with flip charts on my planning, and then set this 10-year vision and thought, we'll do that and then we'll be out of here. And just to give you an idea of timings, I started with myself and 3 board members, and then we did a 3-year strategy every 3 years, but it was cyclical, and every year we reviewed the research plan and moved it, really. So I think that's a bit about the planning side. I reckon it takes a bit like Anna and Sue. It takes quite a long time to make things actually happen, but I've just actually written a book to write up my own story. I became a born-again Christian, if you can excuse the cliche, in 1999, having gone through all sorts of other faiths. And I decided if I wrote up my story, then it could hopefully be there for other people. So if you find this interesting, please do look at the book. It's coming out on the 18th of June. It's called Overcoming. And it's really, as I think Jonny's book talks about, it's not just about the high days, it's about the desert times. I've had situations where I could have lost my life, or numerous times, really. I've had situations where people thought I was completely mad. People thought they'd come back bring me home in a body bag, or all sorts of things because of the craziness of the world I lived in. But we have made a lasting impression. We have seen the law change in Somalia against FGM, and we have seen the law change in Sudan, which is exactly where I met that little girl. And it's a cyclical story because I met her at 5, which I met her at 10. She'd had FGM at 5. She had a little girl at 10, and then now she'd be 25 with a daughter of kind of 15 and a granddaughter of 5 who now is protected in law against FGM by the laws we've been able to put in place from this work. So that feels like job done really, and somebody else can do the next phase. But in my hobby time, I do chaplaincy as well. So there's other things to do.
Yeah. So helpful to hear about. And I mean, the reason for me this stuff's really important is that a lot of the training that people do, focuses on the Missio Dei and contextualization and all these other things that I absolutely love and are important, but you don't always learn how to do a spreadsheet or how to plan stuff. And so it's really good to hear your kind of covering a room with post-it notes and having to find donors. You lose your funding, you've got to go again. And you came out with what I think is a classic pioneer phrase, which you said early on, which was that I'd said, well, I'm going to do it anyway. I mean, stuff the church that says I'm not going to do it, I'm going to do it anyway. And I love that kind of spirit about you. And I really look forward. I've had a sneak preview of your book, which is great. But I mean, the thing that got me fired up as a young Christian was reading, this is going to show my age, Jackie Pullinger, Nicky Cruz, and Vincent Donovan's story, these sort of stories of people that heard a call and did it against the odds. So it's great that you've written up your story. So thanks ever so much. And and I love that quote about you as a petite little woman. People don't realise what's going to hit them or something. Cool, thanks. And there's a link in the comments, everybody, to where you can get Anne-Marie's book from, which comes out in June. And I think there's a book launch the 18th of June. Look out for that too. Yeah, really cheering you on, Anne-Marie, in that. So the third theme, this is very big picture sketch of the stuff, by the way. You could spend ages on all of these themes. The third one that inevitably you get involved in as a pioneer is change. And what change looks like. And I'm going to chat to Anna about this, Anna Hembury. I mean, Anna and I have known each other for absolutely eons, to be honest, from youth ministry days. And I've always found Anna really, really inspiring. But 24 years ago, moving into Hull to just settle down, live there, and it would be great if we could chat about change. And the interview we did in the book, you used a metaphor of bread rising, which I make bread, so I was very drawn to that metaphor. You said it's like the slow rise of bread, change in a place. So can you say something about what on earth you thought you were doing and what change you might bring about and what actually has happened in Hull over that sort of period of time? And maybe give us a little feel of the context as well, because people might not know what it's like there.
Sure. So, I don't know, the audio's a bit funny, but I'll carry on and hope you can hear me. The area of Hull that we live in is in the top 3% of most deprived everything. So it's not really the sort of place that people are recommended to go buy a house or raise their kids. It appealed to us for some reason, and we were like, came as very like, yeah, we're long term, we're gonna be here for a good 5 years, and then obviously, a few years in, we're just like, that was just completely unrealistic. But we didn't really have much of a plan, and we still don't have much of a plan. I'm completely in awe of Anne-Marie. It's like she's she's a good friend, but she's completely the opposite to me. I don't even own a flip chart or post-it notes. And I'm just not a planner or a strategist. I try to plan, but it doesn't come naturally to me at all. And I think for a long time I thought this was a huge failing on my part, but now I just think, well, we just, we're all different. And I think I need planners in my world, but I am not that person myself. So we didn't have a plan of how to change things, but we were confronted with what injustice means on the ground, you know, what it looks like in real life to real people. So change was very much our desire. It was part of what we wanted to see. I think what we found by being here a long time is that really mostly it's about changing yourself, not to say that we don't have anything to contribute, or that we don't have you know, a love that we want to share, or a Jesus that we know, or any of the other stuff, but none of that is ever about the other person only. It was always a kind of evolution of both of us together. So that said, I think I can't really remember why you asked the question about bread, but I think I would say that the 24 years, I made the analogy with bread because bread really, you can do bread really quickly. You know, supermarkets do bread really quickly, and you can make it at home yourself very quickly. But slow bread is tastier bread. Slow bread uses very little amount of yeast, which I liken to ourselves not needing to be very much of us in the picture of the change we want to see. You only need a little, but then it takes a very slow fermenting time. But then the bread that comes out of that process is bread that lasts longer, bread that's more nutritious and is easier for your body to pick up the nutrients from that, and it's just tastier. So I think that's, to me, is kind of how I see life in Hull, is like, let's do it tastier, but that involves a long length of time.
Yeah, and one of the phrases that you use that I really like, and that you got some really good stories with, is your well, at least when we spoke before, you were at pains to point out that you weren't trying to fix other people or do things to other people. You're just present with people. But having said that, you quite like curating ordinary spaces for change, which is a kind of intriguing idea. So can you give us an example maybe of an ordinary space for change? So something that's happened that's ended up being transforming for people?
Yeah, so one of the things that I was involved in starting here is it grew really out of my relationship with women who are involved in survival sex work in our area. Our area includes the red light area for zone for Hull, and long story short, I felt like we needed a kind of therapeutic space, but not a project for, you know, sex workers or any other particularly marginalized groups, but a therapeutic space where women from all walks of life could build connection, build community, and a safe place and a creative, beautiful place. So I'd never really wanted it to be a project, just create something that evolved naturally, but with some careful curation. And I asked lots of people who I thought would know better than me, and they all advised against it, saying, you know, it's all very tricky, and you haven't got the, it would take lots of important professional things, and I was advised against it. But anyway, I felt compelled to do it. So I created this thing along with, not on my own, with a friend and then others, called orts. And the word orts means waste scraps, scraps of material or food or anything that to be discarded. And so we work with material. It's a sewing collective, so we work mostly with material and threads and wool and stuff that other people would either be throwing out or, you know, giving away, just odds and ends that they don't want anymore. But we use that word because it also kind of seemed to describe how many of us feel often, like waste scraps, that, you know, we feel that really society would be better off if we were just binned. So that was where the word came from. And it's become this, but it's now, I think, about 6 years old. We started super small with nothing. I mean, I started in my dining room because I couldn't really find anywhere to do it, but we soon found a space, and it's become this kind of really sacred space where women from all walks of life come, and everybody's ministering to each other, but nobody knows that that's what they're there for. So we have street sex workers, we have very nice ladies from suburban areas of Hull who are kind of grandmothers, twin set and pearl types. We've got community activists, we've got people from Bangladesh and Somalia, and people with one leg, people with all sorts of disability. It really is a crazy mix, but a beautiful mix. And that's the part of the strength of Orts is that it isn't a project, and it isn't singular to one group of people. So you get this kind of real mix. And I think the curation for me comes with making sure that mix exists, that it's always a space that is, it's not for marginalized people, but it's always a space that is a space where they feel comfortable and where they're present, because otherwise we're all losing out, quite frankly. And in that kind of permaculture way of where you think about, you're not like really managing what you're growing in this tight way, but you are looking after it, and you're thinking about what you plant together, what might you plant next to each other for mutual benefit. I think that's what happens in Orts, is this kind of mutual nourishment of each other, because we are so diverse, but because we're also all women and all connected. And it's also very a remarkably spiritual space, I should say. We always started off with it kind of, those of us who would be setting up would check in together and catch up, and then have a little prayer time before we started. But then other people started to hear about this and said, oh, can they come early and join us for prayer? So we've, that became a thing. It's often, it's just very easy. There isn't really a separation between, where does God fit into this, or where do we introduce God?
Yeah, and I love the way that it's just kind of evolved naturally like that. It's fantastic. Yeah, and it's very kingdom. And I think in terms of fresh expressions of church, it's not a kind of formulaic thing. It's something that's emerged. It's emergent in that way, and the permaculture metaphor works really well for it. Yeah, thanks ever so much. I mean, sorry, I'm going to have to cut you off there just because time whizzing by. But so that third area, thinking about change, we haven't got time to explore this today, but again, in the research I asked people what's most likely to derail your pioneering, and the top answer that came back was the powers that be. And quite a lot of the time people were referring to institutional structures in the church or council or whatever it is. So change is also, in terms of practice, learning to navigate those systems and powers, as it were, and to be wise and tactical, I suppose, about that. That's something that's taken me a while to learn, but I've seen that more and more over the years. The last theme I want to just introduce, just share screen again quickly, is I mean, in some ways this is the most surprising thing I've learned at CMS, but perhaps it's the most obvious. At least I didn't expect to learn it, that one of the most significant discoveries for pioneers is learning to be themselves. Because I think we often look to the most extreme or entrepreneurial. So we look at someone like Anne-Marie and what she's doing and compare ourselves and think, well, I look at Anne-Marie and think, I wonder if I am a pioneer. But actually, we're not called to be Anne-Marie. I'm called to be Jonny. David's called to be David, and so on. So I think this is a real key insight, that God calls us to be the person we're made to be, and pioneering goes well when we do it out of that. So I'm going to chat to David now, who has actually, he started 2 fresh expressions where he is. One came out of an alpha group, and the other came out of connecting with guys on the local housing area where he is, and talking about boxing and setting up the Good Shepherd boxing community. And in the book, this is one of the drawings and a quote from where I talked with David, where he says it's church for people who want to punch stuff. So yeah, that's the first, I think. So David, let's chat to you. You can stop sharing screen. I mean, tell us a little bit, David, first of all, about the boxing church and how that came about, just quickly, if you can.
Yeah, sure. Well, it's kind of birthed out of living with people more than an essence of boxing itself. Lived on a council residence where I didn't really know what a missional community was or anything of those buzzwords. I just kind of lived what we call lived and loved. So we just spent a lot of time just living with people, and it was only once that had taken place for a long period of time was we able to kind of meet with people on the stairwell. We used to drink beers when they were smoking in the stairwells and kind of just chatting to people, and we would talk about our younger life and perhaps getting into some sort of mischief when we were younger. And then when we became adults, you know, it became harder to, when you got kids, to go to a gym or find a place to get fit or to kind of exert some kind of energy. And one of the guys just recommended, wouldn't it be great if we had our own local gym? And then I thought, well, maybe I should help them create one. So that was the beginning, the birthplace of it, which we then went to my church, got some seed money, bought some boxing gear and kicked it off, really.
Yeah, I remember you saying to me that you were lying in bed one night saying to God, I wonder if you're asking me to start a boxing club.
Yeah,
I love that. I think it's great, and I was at the launch of it. Great guys, and you know, you just get the sense they just wouldn't be in the regular Church of the Good Shepherd. It's just a different culture and so on. So really great. Love what you've done there. But in terms of this BU stuff, I don't know what you would say is at the core of you and who you are. You talked about being loyal to the soil, so there's something about that. But, you know, who is David? What does it mean for you to discover pioneering out of who you are rather than someone else? Have you got any thoughts on that, or what's that journey been like?
Yeah, well, I think the thing is, like all of us, and probably loads of people listening to this, is like, I don't know if I actually really know who I actually am yet. I don't know if I'm still actually working that out, as in my life, I'm living a process of always discovering or continuously discovering who it is that I'm called to be or where I'm called to act. I remember when I went to the selection panel for becoming a vicar in the Church of England, they used to say, "Oh, be yourself." And I used to think, if I was really myself at that panel, I would definitely never get through. And so I don't never say to people, don't be yourself, but I always say to people, don't be someone you're not. And so I've kind of just continued in my life to work through trying not to be someone that I know I'm not meant to be, and allowing that person of myself to come through it. And so I think for the boxing, where we kind of link that, is I'm always asking a question with the guys who come, like, what does it mean to be yourself, through an element of what does it mean to be physically well in terms of physically fit, but also what does it mean to be spiritually well, and how do we kind of merge those worlds together? How do they find a place to kind of allow yourself to discover who you are through fitness, but also through spirituality? And then so we go on this weird, wonderful journey all about what does that mean, where some of the guys got baptized in a boxing ring in the church. But I think in anything, what about being myself is they allow me to become more myself than sometimes I'm allowed to be in the church, which I find always quite unique. It's almost like they reveal the grace of God to me more sometimes than I find in other people. And it's almost like a reminder to myself, like, that's who I'm meant to be. When they show me that grace, when they show me that love, when they welcome me into their lives, when they say, I'll come and be a part of this, or if someone would pass away, or could I pray about a particular area of their life, it's like they remind me of who I'm meant to be as a kind of Christian, a kind of godly person, wherever you define that. It's kind of open-ended, I guess. But they invoke that in me to become the true me that is revealed in the face of them, but in the face of myself. And I hope, well, I don't know, probably egotistically, I hope that in some way I'm helping them through what we do to become more of their true self.
Yeah, thanks, David. That's really lovely. Yeah, and as you say, it's an ongoing process, I think. But it is quite easy to forget sometimes who you are and who you're called to be. And actually, I've never got ordained, but I see the pressure on people that get ordained in public kind of leadership, particularly to perform a role, and you can sometimes feel people need to refine themselves. So our time's whizzed by. We want to give a little bit of time for question, but essentially those are the big themes that I've kind of I'm exploring in this book through interviews and stories, and then lots of practical articles on soul work and practice and working out who you're called to be and so on. So thanks, guys, for coming along sharing. But are there any questions, Lizzie, that have popped up, or any comments you want to highlight?
I'm muted. There's always someone that does that on any call. So I'll just there's not any, I haven't seen any kind of main questions. There's a lot of love for all the stories that have been shared, which is fantastic. And kind of a lots of, I suppose, more like amens of like people agreeing with. Oh yeah, we've got a question here, Stuart. Can you give us a name of the link to the book? And that's your book, Jonny. Do you want to plug it now?
This isn't actually it, although it looks like it. This is a kind of precursor just to see that some of the pages were printing right. But it should be landing on my doormat on Friday. It was a Kickstarter thing, so I'll be sending it out to people who back the Kickstarter. But then you will be able to get it through website GETsidetracked.co. GETsidetracked.co. Now, if you look there now, you can't order it yet because it's not quite ready. So it'll probably be 2 weeks. So you can find me and email me and do a deal that way. But in a couple of weeks, it will be available through GETsidetracked.co, which, I mean, the name itself, I think, is quite good for pioneering in that I ran a series of webinars in January on imagination and creativity, and one of the ways that you come up with ideas is often if you get knocked out of your routine or get sidetracked. And I enjoyed that idea so much through those webinars that I've ended up setting a new partnership up with 2 other people. I just can't help myself, so I've now got a new project to run. And if you look up on Amazon, if you search, I thought, who else has done a book called Get Sidetracked? They're all books like How Not to Get Sidetracked and Stay Focused.
It's like the opposite version of a lot of the kind of very like focused books.
That's right. Where you get it. And can I give a plug for the training too? If people are interested in training with CMS, if you Google Church Mission Society Pioneer, oh, there it is, yeah, you'll find it. But in terms of practice, I really think it's helpful to get with some other people doing the practice. You know, I feel inspired just by being with these guys today. You know, you just pick up a sense of how practice works, and that's one of the huge benefits of training. But actually a lot of the kind of tools and skills and theology, missiology, all that is really helpful for pioneering too. So yeah, do have a look at that. And because of, I mean, like a lot of things, we learned through COVID how good it is to be online and so on. You can actually do the MA fully online from September, and the undergrad stuff is all going to be blended. So half of it's online, half of it offline. So it's going to be a lot more available more widely. So yeah, we learned something through COVID. Hated it, but, you know.
There's Tim, who I work with. He's got a comment here. Many of us are not in boxing church, but sadly we still want to hit people. So, and then we've got some agreements afterwards. So yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you to all of you guys that have joined us today. It's been so helpful, and the research that you've done, Jonny, just it's so grounded in like that. It, as you were talking about the practices, it was all the stuff that I've been learning as we've been kind of pioneering. And we've just got a few more minutes. There's one question I kind of wanted to ask, and it was really as you talked about kind of staying in a place for a long time, and a lot of you, really all the stories talked about like the years of like developing and building and connecting with people and seeing kind of where God is at work. And when we started, we kind of moved to Liverpool to start a fresh expression, to kind of pioneer something new for people that don't go to church. There's so much pressure to kind of start it and then move on. And there's that kind of 3, 4, maximum 5-year window that that was, I don't know, that we'd kind of inherited. And then the longer we stayed, the more we realized that we needed to stay longer in order to kind of build and develop what we'd started. And I didn't know whether you thought that was a result of how culture has changed. Like, do you think the missional landscape now, do we need longer time, or whether really we've always needed longer, but we're only just realizing it? I don't know if anyone's got any thoughts about that. Like, do you, because we're in a post-Christian culture.
I mean, I'd say it's both and it's partly about who you are and what you're called to do. So it was clear for Anna that the calling was to an incarnational living in that place and loves that place. So for some people it's that, but for other people that isn't their calling. They're better at sort of starting something and so on. I mean, there's a question in the chat from Nick White that I might throw to Anna Hembury. But I think this kind of relates to it. The danger or the risk of staying for too long can be that you're the person in charge running things and you don't get out of the way. So I think this question from Nick is really good. Hi, Nick, by the way. Haven't seen you for a long time. You know, how in the kind of community you're in, Anna, do you blend that being there for a long time, but also enabling and empowering other people to lead and get out of the way at the same time? Is that possible?
Yeah, I think it is definitely possible and necessary. It's not always easy to do, but you know, for me, actually, ironically, I'm not really I'm much better at starting things than sticking around a long time. So it hasn't come easily to me, and I'm not really, I've never, growing up, I'd never lived in the same place for more than a couple of years. So, you know, the idea of being anywhere forever was fairly terrifying, especially anywhere in Britain, but, you know, hey ho. But yeah, I think encouraging leaders, I think the first thing is always see the place that you're in as full of treasure and assets, not, you know, problems to be fixed or solved, regardless of very real issues and poverty and, you know, systemic change that needs to happen. It's not to say that that stuff isn't there and doesn't need addressing, but it's how it's not just what you're looking at, but how you're looking. The eyes with which you're looking are important. And I think, you know, encouraging leaders. I remember once in a church years ago, they had this kind of, I don't know, some sort of pyramid strategy for discipleship or something. It was a fairly terrifying church. But one of the things they said was look for the, you know, it was from that verse in Luke, look for the person of peace. And if they're not there, shake the dust off your feet and get out of there, kind of thing. And I found that kind of harsh. I mean, I know Jesus said it, but it's still kind of harsh. But I also thought it's really, it kind of does a disservice to who we understand as a leader, because the people who you see as a leader, or even who you see as an asset in the community, yes, great, you know, let's help everyone flourish. But actually people who are really written off and who have written themselves off have huge massive potential, a better potential really, to change the world, because they're the ones most at the bottom end of things. They're the ones that suffer for everything that's wrong with the world as it is. So to me, the upside downers of the kingdom needs to go right to that place where the people who aren't even really you wouldn't think of them as leaders, they're the ones who are meant to lead. But that's not to put pressure on people. I think it's really easy to kind of put pressure on someone because you think you've seen them as treasure, and it's all going to be great, I'll make the space for you and we'll help you be a leader, and it just terrifies people and they just don't see them for 2 years. And rightly so, because that was more about our bright idea of what people need to do than allowing them to be them. So yeah, there's no short answer really, but I do think the leadership, actually getting out of the way is as important as pitching in and turning up.
Amazing. Oh, no, that's so helpful. Thank you so much, Anna. Well, we've come to the end of our conversation. There are loads of places you can find out more. There's a link for Anne-Marie's book that's coming out soon, so do get your hands on that. Jonny's book, when it arrives, we will, and when it's released, we'll share that on our social media as well, and hopefully so you can get hold of that book soon. If you want to find out more about Fresh Expressions, we have a number of different events and things like that go on throughout the year, and we have monthly online conversations like this one. Then do sign up. The link is in the chat, and you can sign up to find out more about Fresh Expressions and what we've got going on. But for now, thank you so much to all of you. It's been such a rich conversation and so many fantastic stories and examples, and I'm just so grateful that you gave your time to do this. So thank you so much, and thanks for joining us, everyone who's joined us live, and we will see you soon. Goodbye.